the South and the North, God and Satan, and now modern warfare and Battlefield. Well, folks, it took us 100 goddamn years, but we finally found a conflict more pointless than World War I. But enough with the exposition, it's time for a face-off. Battlefield 3 versus Modern Warfare 3. The battle no rational human being should give a fraction of a shit about.
Heaven or hell, fuel one, let's rock!
From the outset, you're told all you need to know about Battlefield 3 by the mere fact that at least on the 360 version, the multiplayer disc is Disc 1, and the single-player disc is Disc 2. As if after fashioning the carbon copy of Call of Duty's multiplayer, DICE had some table scraps left over, and instead of feeding them to Jim Sterling like usual, opted instead to fashion a full single-player experience. Now mind you, this obviously isn't the case on the PS3, because as Sony's obnoxious advertisements are so quick to remind us, Blu-ray not only stores data, but mows your lawn and performs nightly testicular massage on every Sony fanboy in a 5-block radius. Now that's what I call a firmware update! The Blu-ray's masseuse credentials notwithstanding, DICE couldn't have pronounced their preference for online multiplayer any more explicitly had the project lead materialized on your doorstep and defecated in your mouth upon insertion of Disc 2. Once that scatological foray is concluded, you'll find that out of the gate, Battlefield 3 breaks the bullet time set-piece record previously set by Call of Duty Black Ops in a baffling 15 seconds. Literally, the second thing the player does during one of the game's many try-hard scripted circle jerks is mule kick a terrorist while the clock strikes bullet time. To call this approach juvenile would be to do a massive disservice to the preschool class of 2011. Not to be outdone, our first obnoxious QuickTime event rears its pockmarked visage before we've reached the end of the first fucking minute. Is the game linear? Well, it opens up in a subway car, and that manages to be the game's high watermark. A Muslim housewife has more options than the player does in Battlefield 3. The game doesn't even trust you to move from one linear set piece to the next without training wheels, hence the bright-ass follow icon above NPCs' heads. And by the way, follow is evidently shorthand for the next likely victim, because your teammates have a habit of dropping like Kennedys, a fate you'll likely share, though not for the reasons you think. You'll see more mission failed screens for daring to venture 5 feet out of the suffocatingly linear mission path than you will from actual enemy gunfire. And that isn't hyperbole either. I literally stepped down an alley not 10 fucking feet from one of the many Kennedys it was my pleasure to soak up bullets for during the course of the game, and almost instantly failed the mission. I didn't get shot. He didn't get shot. All I did was take 5 steps forward. Have we turned into fucking hamsters, Rageaholics? Just walking forward long enough to encounter another shooting gallery and or set piece and repeating ad nauseum until our frontal lobe atrophies from lack of use? If I made an eating game out of every time Battlefield 3 forces you to critically think, I'd have catabolic fits and die of fucking starvation before I finish the fucking game. Which is oddly appropriate, as the further the game progresses, the more apparent it becomes that Battlefield 3's plot is so waifishly thin you could slice Kate Moss in half with it lengthwise. The narrative in Battlefield 3 feels like it was written by one of Tom Clancy's ghostwriters, who was then promptly mauled by a dyslexic baboon, who then elected to rewrite the story using only a pen wedged between his swollen blue butt cheeks. And that fictitious scenario is infinitely more interesting than this game's actual story. Fact. Don't misinterpret this vitriolic rant for mere nitpicking, however. I have a past with the Battlefield series, and I still consider Battlefield 1942 to be one of the finest multiplayer first-person shooters you could ever possibly play. But if Battlefield 3 is an accurate barometer for the series' current progress, then the only object that's experienced a more rapid decline than the Battlefield series wound up as smoldering wreckage in a field in Pennsylvania. With all that said, however, hold to the nearest stable surface as I reveal the fact that I actually had a hell of a time playing Battlefield 3, not due to its actual quality, mind you, but because I was blaring my entire metal collection via the Xbox 360's custom soundtrack function for the totality of the single-player campaign. So, to me, it was less a monochromatic military shooter and more an interactive King Diamond music video with shooting and explosions. In other words, the greatest video game ever made. The comparisons between Battlefield's Call of Duty counterpoint are obvious, and even elicited by the developers, but honestly, it's not a comparison that should have been invited, because Battlefield 3 does almost nothing that Call of Duty already isn't doing. Right down to the annoying and contagious down-the-sight aiming that we all so frequently see real-life soldiers practice in the middle of a flurry of actual gunfire. Yeah, sure, asshole, there's time to line up your sights in the middle of a firefight. Why not wield a musket and have some tea and crumpets? Evidently, it's a lazy Sunday afternoon in Fallujah. Sure, that makes even a fraction of a percentage of goddamn sense, which brings me at last to the subject of Modern Warfare 3, the latest in a long line of annual sequels whose only constant has been a penchant for consistently degrading quality. As if not only aware, but openly solicitous of the fact that the Call of Duty series' mannequin-like protagonists have a habit of spouting stilted, meaningless military jargon that real combat troops wouldn't use under penalty of water torture, Infinity Ward has opted to steer into the shit skid by christening Modern Warfare 3's new little bundle of personality none other than, are you ready for this? Frost. Well, shit, Infinity Ward, why stop there? Name the main characters in the next 9 trillion interchangeable annual installments, something truly bone-snappingly cliche. I, for one, look forward to the prospect of discovering new and inventive shades of brown as Oscar Mike. Hey, at least they're both actual fucking names this time. I can see it now. His aptitude with a sniper rifle is surpassed only by his ability to survive lethal barrages of bullets due to his split-second application of magical raspberry jam. Of course, in the nomenclature department, I suppose Frost came out ahead of his teammates Grinch and Truck, not of course to be confused with their commanding officer, medium-sized 4-door sedan. Answer me this, Rageaholics, how do you even earn a nickname like Truck? Let me take a shot in the dark and say, by owning a truck? Well, if ownership of a given object is the only prerequisite for acquiring a like call sign, then I suppose that explains why the Game Over Thinker's call sign is Semen-Encrusted Tifa Blow-Up Doll. If there's one thing Modern Borefare has over Banalfield 3, it's the opening mission. Not only does it eschew slow-mo and quick-time events of any description, but it takes place in an urban environment, which is always a hoot and a half. Those Russians certainly took the whole Occupy Wall Street thing a bit literally, though. One thing I will say on Battlefield's behalf, at least the characters in Banalfield are merely forgettable, which puts them well in advance of Modern Warfare's actively irritating cuntbag conglomerate. When they aren't grooming their absurd and impractical facial hair, they're regurgitating armchair philosophy accrued from the same copy of Nietzsche for Dummies that Kojima calls the vast majority of his facile melodrama from. Oh, what's that, Captain Price? There's no such thing as good and evil? War is just evolution played out on a grand scale? Yeah, Earth to Infinity Ward. We don't give a fuck how many philosophy books on tape you've absorbed into that cavernous expanse betwixt your ears. Sasha Grey reads shit tons of beginner's philosophy books too, but you know what? At the end of the day, she'll still fuck a syphilitic stranger for cash. Shut the fuck up, have a Pabst Blue Ribbon, and give the Voltaire delusions a fucking rest. Comparing multiplayer is a pointless exercise because with the exception of Battlefield's emphasis on vehicular combat, they're essentially identical. Thus, I find myself leaning more in Battlefield's direction for the mere fact that it offers more options, thus reducing the possibility that assholes are just gonna skitter fuck around like a mongoose with a meth habit, tack-knifing everyone into oblivion. For what they are, these aren't bad games, but unfortunately what they are is a bad genre of game, and I would further caution the ample-bellied professional reviewers who've lately implored the gaming public to take these games on their own terms from getting too existential on the subject. Sure, if you lump Tito and Mussolini in with the rest of the murderous dictators, well shit, next to people like Hitler and Stalin, they come out looking like motherfucking Gandhi. But you know what? At the end of the day, they're still stark, raving assholes that murdered shit tons of people. For that reason, it's important to adhere to a personal criteria that stands unencumbered by favorable comparisons to games in its own vapid genre. Compared to shit like L.A. Noire and Deus Ex Human Revolution, these two games are fucking trash. Actually, they're more than that. They're
Gutter trash.
Battlefield 3 I dubbed the king shit of Turd Mountain, master of all thy domain, and unfortunately your domain consists primarily of generic modern military shooters, a genre that already has a nice cozy spot set aside for it in the bargain bin of the future, along with such enduring classics as PS2-era shovelware and Rock Band and Guitar Hero yearly sequels to stand solemn testament to the fact that for every meteoric rise, there's a Kilimanjaric descent back to the fucking Earth. So enjoy your stay in the sun while it lasts, modern military shooters, because the way you're milking your tired formula today, it's doubtful your franchises will witness the advent of the next generation of video game consoles. I'm Razor Fist God. Fucking speed.